Well, hello everyone, Brandon Bonifer, and you are back on another episode of OnFocus. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about The Bachelor, Listen to Your Heart. Last week episode, we really kind of just unpacked what this new show meant to Bachelor Nation. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the characters that are in it, their involvement with each other, and some of the dating experiences that happened in the second week. As also, we're going to talk about what this show might look like down the road as far as some of the judging. That was one of our big questions is, what is this? Is this a show where you win a prize, or do you win love, fame? What is it? So today I have with me Briana Butler and Carrie Gillespie. We're going to unpack this show a little bit. First off, Carrie, start with you. Obviously, last night was the second week. What was your thoughts? Were you excited to see it? I know we kind of went into the show last week with your thoughts being, hey, I'm going to check it out. Where did you kind of stand going into it after having a week to kind of like process what the show was going to look like?
So this week, even more, I was looking forward to watching this show. The first week, it was strange because I didn't know any of these people, and we kind of had to go through that getting to know them process. One of the things I love about Bachelor in Paradise is that we already know these people. So we know their backstory. We knew Blake's backstory. We knew, all these people's backstory that already, gets us going into the makeup of the show and starts weaving the plot into it. With these people, we didn't know them, but I'm starting to get to know them. And as I do, I'm becoming more invested in their stories.
Talking to Bree last week, you said a lot of times you don't recognize who they are until you're a few weeks into it. Going into this show, was there a character or two that you maybe spent a little bit of time learning about so that you had a little bit more connection going into the show this week?
Yeah, I think that Bachelor does a really good job of creating these character narratives, and they do a good job of like introducing a character and then introducing some dramatic element and then coming back to the character and helping us get to know them more. And I think that the first week is always kind of hard because it's just one person after another. And this week they delved a little bit more into some of the people that they didn't have time for last week. And it's funny because you can always tell by who they spend time on who's going home. So like at the rose ceremony, like Brett, my husband, and I, we were like, who is that? And so when they got sent home, we weren't emotionally attached at all.
Yeah, I noticed that too at the rose ceremony. There was a few individuals that like did not get like any screen time. So that was kind of, it wasn't surprising to see them leave. Now, this week we've seen 4 dates that took place. And what was confusing for me about these dates is on similar days, there was multiple dates taking place. So you constantly saw throughout the show that they were jumping around from one date to the next date, back to the house. And the timeline kind of seemed all over the place. When you guys saw the first date card, Trevor got it. Did you instantly have an idea who he was going to pick, Carrie?
Yeah, I thought he was going to pick Jamie, and part of me was like, well, I want to see someone else because Jamie already had a date. But Trevor's also someone who I think, I wanted to know more about from the first episode, so I was glad he got it. I kind of figured he would take Jamie. The selfish part of me kind of wanted him to take someone else so I could get to know someone else. But we learned a lot about Trevor from this date, both how he interacted with Jamie and then the repercussions of what happened after the date. So I was glad he got it from like getting to know him more as a person and getting to know his story more.
Talking about repercussions, Briana, there was some newcomers that came on the show, and one of them was Natasha, and she had a little say about Trevor when she got on the show. What was your thoughts about her coming on the show and being aggressive? Because she didn't really make much, noise about herself, or she didn't really try to connect with everybody at what her role was being there or what she wanted. She was very much, I felt, kind of attacking Trevor and trying to get the girls and the people there to really kind of like notice her in that way.
I think the producers on this show are wizards, and they somehow always are able to find somebody that's going to come in and cause drama. And I think that by not showcasing her musical talent, by not really we really didn't even get to know her at all. Her role was really to come in and stir the pot. And I think that's what made this episode more interesting than last week's. So I'm not faulting them for it, but I guess there's a reason that she's on the show, but I don't necessarily like her for what she did.
Yeah, and when Trevor and Jamie...
I want to know what you guys think, both of you, about how she kind of spilled the beans on the cheating and lying to the whole group before she approached Trevor, because I think, she only had one side of the story from the girl, Trevor's ex, who's her friend, but she shared that all, like, aired his dirty laundry with the entire group without hearing his side of it and, without confronting him first. What is your guys' opinion on that? I really want to hear this. Brandon?
So when they first came back, when Trevor and Jamie first came back from the date, and instantly she wanted to talk to Trevor and like didn't even like give him a second to like decompress his whole date. She instantly wanted to talk to him. First off, I thought that was wrong. I didn't agree with that at all. But at the same time, that led Jamie kind of asking herself, well, what's this all about? What's this girl doing here? Or why does she want to talk to Trevor so quick? So then when Jamie went back and she kind of talked with the other girls, the other girls then kind of had to tell her, hey, this is what kind of happened when you're on your date. And you could tell that Jamie was just like, oh my gosh, and I will give Trevor some benefit of the doubt. I mean, it's not that he has to tell his whole life story, but he was honest, I felt, during a date with Jamie and kind of said, hey, this is a little bit of my history. And he said that, that there was a relationship that kind of was extended longer than probably what should have been taking place. And he didn't want to hurt their feelings because of it. But what I do appreciate about the girls is when they sat down with Jamie and told her what was happening, they said, hey, we only heard her side. Trevor hasn't been able to speak to it. So it was like, they didn't all just jump on the, hey, let's not believe Trevor bandwagon. So I thought that was healthy. But then when you saw her and Trevor sit down, it was really a hostile environment. I felt like she really didn't really give him an opportunity to really explain, nor did he really need to explain. I personally didn't feel like he needed to explain a relationship from a year and a half, 2 years ago, other than the fact that, hey, it happened. Yeah, maybe there was some things in there that I've learned or grown from, but I think each person has to look at themselves, especially in that time frame of age. We mature so fast as individuals. Every relationship compounds who we are as individuals, no different than this show compounds who you are as an individual.
Well, put this down in the history books because I agree with Brandon. Pretty much everything you said. So, no, I think that's a really good assessment. And also, so clarify for me at this point, they've only been there at the mansion or whatever for 2 days, 3 days?
Yeah, like literally days. Like, so think of it this way. If you had just met someone and just went on a first date, just met them, would you right away be like, look, I emotionally cheated on someone, like I kind of did this and I regret it and I've learned a lot, and like, would you go into all your dirty laundry like right away? And I think the answer is no. Like,
and you wouldn't
I don't know.
And you wouldn't do it on national television to start with. So I mean,
yeah, you just wouldn't. It's not a first date type of thing. Like, it's just not.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But kind of looking at Trevor and Jamie's date, I thought it was a good date. I like how they're keeping the date simple, and they're not like huge, and they're not flying helicopters, they're not jumping off buildings yet, but they're keeping the date simple, and they are really connecting music to the date. And that was one thing that I thought was kind of empowering throughout all the dates. So let's kind of jump into the next date. The next date we saw, I believe it was Chris and Bree that went on a date.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts, Carrie, on that date?
They are so cute. I think that they have, maybe it's just because she's a Bree and I just love Brees, But I think they are so cute, and it was just really genuine. They are one of those people who instantly, they just clicked. There's been no messing around. There's been no like, oh, I'm going to check this person out. They instantly clicked and we're just going for it. And so I think it's great. I think eventually they'll get boring, just like in Bachelor in Paradise when Dylan and Hannah hooked up. It was like eventually they just get boring, so we don't hear much from them. But for right now, I'm totally here for it.
And I would agree with you. You saw after their date, neither of them got much screen time in the rest of the show. But there was a lot of other things going on, which leads us to our third date. I'm going to go with Bree because we learned last week that you really kind of have a spot for this guy a little bit. And he picked, I think Julian was her name. Julia, which I think she has some really awesome talent. What was your thoughts on that date? What do you think of him in his role, and the fact that her heart was kind of being torn across another individual that was
Yeah, I really like, so we're talking about Sheridan and Julia, and
Yeah.
I really like Sheridan, and he reminds me though of Grocery Store Joe from Paradise. So he's like all in with Julia, just like Grocery Store Joe was with Kendall, and Kendall kind of flirted around on Paradise, and just it's almost like he's being backburnered, I guess you would call it, by Julia.
Friend zoned. He's getting friend zoned.
Yeah, and I don't like that, but I also like, if she's not into him, you're not into him, and that's fine. What I hate though is how as soon as she knew that she didn't have a shot with her first choice, she was like, oh, well, I guess he's okay. And I hate that. It's like, if you're not feeling it, don't force it.
And we'll just jump ahead here, kind of a spoiler. He ended up giving her the rose at the ceremony. And then when they got back into the room, Brandon, who had picked a different girl, which we'll get to that in a second because they went on a date together, he went up to her and gave her a hug and said, I'm really glad you're here. Let's talk. And I'm just sitting there saying, wait, 9 minutes ago, and she says this too, a few minutes ago, you didn't pick me. Why do you want to talk to me about that or talk now? So what do you think Brandon was doing? Do you think he was being strategic going into next week, knowing that the girls now have the power, so he's got two choices? Or was he just trying to defuse or de-escalate any drama by her staying on the show?
I think there's a
Okay, so this situation gave me major Dean, Christina, and D-Lo vibes. Does anyone remember this?
Yes.
When they were in a love triangle on BIP, and Dean ended up picking Christina. And then someone gave D-Lo a rose. So Dean picked Christina, but then someone random gave D-Lo a rose. And then Dean came back and was hooking up with D-Lo again after he had picked Christina. It was one of those things where he picked Christina, but it was like, oh, but she's still here. So you're saying there's a chance. It's like one of those things. It gave me major like love triangle from BIP vibes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I just felt bad because you could see, and again, producers do a great job editing this show. As those two were talking, you could see Sheraton seeing their conversation take place, and you could just tell he was like just disgusted from it. But overall, their date, Sheraton and Julia's date, or I can't say that. What's her name again?
Julia.
It is Julia. Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to Sheraton and Julia's date, what did you guys think of their duet that they did on stage?
I thought it was amazing. I think they both have incredible and sing together really well. And then they had that make out at the end, and I don't know, it seemed like she was feeling it, but I guess she wasn't.
When I saw that, segment of the show and I saw the power in that music, it really just kind of made me a believer saying, hey, they actually really have something here. They have music that I can connect with. There's tons of different genres that are taking place across this show. And the individuals are culturally different in music, but yet they're finding love, which that leads me to the next date, the fourth date, where Brandon got the choose to go on a date. And they went to, I think, a jazz bar. And he ended up, and now again, for you guys that have not followed the show as much as we have so far, Brandon is the one individual, again, that's in this love triangle. But he chose to go outside that triangle, and he chose, I believe her name was Savannah, which we talked a little bit about last week, of maybe Savannah being someone that's going to interject drama. But I didn't see a lot of drama from her last night. What was your guys' thought on the date with Brandon and her?
He just seems very, well, he's 34. I have the bios up on the site in my other window. So he's 34, and I think there's a reason he's still single. It's like he's one of these guys that maybe coming on this show, he's getting all this attention all of a sudden. So he's like, I'm going to see what I can do with this. And I think Savannah is somebody that is, traditionally very beautiful and pretty. And so I think he's like, okay, well, I got these other two girls after me. Let's throw a third one in. Why not?
Absolutely. And after that date, there was another individual that got hang on, I didn't let Carrie talk. Go ahead. I'll cut that out.
Oh, I think Bree's exactly right. I think he's really attractive. I think he's ex-military, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So he's ex-military. That's attractive. He's very physically attractive. I think all the girls kind of want him. We saw Mel, which is the girl with the purple hair, really was into it. I don't, in my personal opinion, he doesn't seem that into any of these girls that much. It's more just like Bree said, like he's getting this attention and it's like, yeah, who doesn't like that,
Absolutely. And speaking of attention, there was another guy that got some major attention after all the dates were done last night, and that was Ryan. What did you guys think of Ryan's first encounter, Bree?
Um, I wasn't a fan of Ryan last week. He was the one that sang John Mayer's Gravity, right? I think that whole interaction was really awkward.
Do you think he's a Clark Kent?
No.
No?
He doesn't do it for me, but yeah.
What about you, Carrie? Do you think he's a Clark Kent? Are you in the nerds?
Okay. Well, I said it last week and I stand by this. He's a combination. If Shawn Mendes and John Mayer had a baby, that's what he is. I don't see Clark Kent. I see Shawn Mendes, John Mayer hybrid. I do think he's extremely talented. He's got, we saw him last week really show off his musical skills. So from that standpoint, for him, I'm seeing this more, I've seen him shine musically. I'm not seeing him make a connection like romantically really right now, which, that's fine. But musically, I'm totally digging, his style and his talent.
I'll agree with that.
So do you think Natasha, obviously being a newcomer, do you think when she came and she, maybe looked at the whole crowd and said, hey, he doesn't have a connection forming with any women, he's an easy opportunity for me to get into the next week?
Hands down. When she said she was into like nerdy guys, I was like, yeah. I was like, no, you're not.
Which their encounter then was kind of followed by another encounter with Rudy. Rudy, throughout this whole episode, you could kind of tell like she wasn't making really any solid connections, and she was kind of going from guy to guy that maybe wasn't really in a connected relationship yet or establishing a relationship, just trying to interact with them. What did you think about how her persona kind of changed throughout the entire episode as she kind of went from guy to guy to guy, ending with that, she called it an awkward kiss, or the most awkward kiss that she's ever had?
I think she's
Oh my
hilarious.
gosh.
I think she's great for the show. I like that she's a little bit different. My husband called her spicy, and I think that's probably a good word for her. Just she was the one that like slapped him and then made out with him. Whoever, I can't remember who it was,
Matt.
but she's got a lot of personality, and I think she's a good addition to the show. But I don't think she's gonna find what she's looking for.
I think she cray.
She cray? What's cray?
Yeah. Do you know what that is? I know you're a little old, but cray?
Yeah, no, I'm a little old. No, I don't know what that is. Oh, like crazy.
Cray.
Wow.
Yeah. I think she's, so I think in real life, she would be like Brett was saying, I think she'd be the spicy, fun friend who's like always full of energy. So I think in real life, she would be a great hang. But on TV and in this situation where there's kind of a lot of pressure and there's a lot of hormones and other things around her, she is coming off super cray. And the whole thing with Ryan, I agree, was super awkward. And then the thing with Matt, who I think she genuinely has a connection with, but she's like getting in her own head about it and making it more complicated, I think, than it needs to. I don't know. I think in real life, she's probably great. On this show, she's looking a little cray.
So talking about last night's show and reflecting on what we talked about last week is this what do you win concept. And when we got into this week and it was 8 women and 8 men and the men had to pick, you obviously knew more people were to come into the show. There was going to be some newcomers. And I was excited for that, just to see how that would change it up. And we saw how it kind of changed up a couple things. But as I started to think about that a little bit and started to think about this as a competition, these people have not only a disadvantage in finding a relationship, but they also have a disadvantage in kind of showcasing who they are and what talents they have. The newcomers last night really didn't feel really got much spotlight in either arena. Do you think that's because of the depth between the relationship, the music, or just because, the show kind of seemed to be moving pretty quick here, only being there a few days?
I think the same thing happens on Paradise, where it gets to be the last week or so, and then they're bringing in new people. And by that point, everything is so established that I think it's really hard to break into that group. And I think even one of the newcomers yesterday went home right away, and we didn't really see her at all. So I think that's proving true on here as well.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, I think in order for this to be successful in my book, I think The Bachelor needs to stick with like their main goal is love. So, I mean, I still don't know what they're going to win at the end, if they're going to win a music contract with their partner or whatever it is. But I think the music is more a way of bonding them. And I think in order for The Bachelor to really be true to itself, to listen to its heart, it needs to stick with like love is their main goal. And I think I said this last week, but that's where they went wrong with Bachelor Pad. They made it more about like the money and the game of it. But if they stick with like the ultimate prize is love, then I think this will be fine.
All right, so get into the rose ceremony, and you girls obviously have a thing for Chris Harrison and him reading the Bible or dictionary, whatever he has to offer. But I love it. If everybody could see what I see right now. No, for real though, throughout the show, he did a good job whenever he came into the show as the host. He was able to kind of reestablish that, listen to your heart. This is about love. I mean, he was doing what he needed to do to help set the tone, set the mood, and reestablish what the goal was here. So as we get into the rose ceremony, and just like every single Bachelor show, it always seems that the connections that we know are going to take place are the first ones to get fulfilled, leaving the audience hanging to say, okay, is this person going to go this way or that way? So easily enough, it was obvious for me that Chris was going to choose Bree. The fact that Trevor chose Jaime was pretty clear for me. The fact that she accepted really for me fermented that, you know what, she doesn't have another strong relationship. She's going to ride this one out another week. And then Matt. Now, Matt was the individual that got slapped by Rudy, but he ended up choosing her. Do you think that was a connection or a lack of a connection?
I think he was into her from the beginning. Wasn't he the one that wanted to kiss her in the hot tub, and then she was like, nah, not yet?
Yeah, that was, yeah.
So maybe there's a little hope for her. We'll see how that relationship goes. And then, well, she coined him. Who is it? Ryan, Natasha. So we'll see where that relationship goes. Next week, the women have the choice or the vote or the voice in this. But looking at Ryan, he went ahead. He's known as the guy that was Clark Kent. Now, he kissed Judy. Oh, no, he didn't. He kissed Rudy.
Rudy.
Wait.
All right.
And Rudy.
There's so much kissing happening. I can't keep up.
All right.
I know, right?
And then was it Danny or Donnie? I'm trying to read my notes.
Danny.
We didn't hear much about him, and he went with Becca.
Got no screen time.
He went with Becca, right?
He went with...
Yeah, neither of those two have gotten any screen time.
Okay. All right, back to the top. So Matt picked Rudy, and then Ryan picked Natasha, and we'll see where that relationship goes. We'll see if she's really into him or if she was just playing through the cards to be able to get her to have a voice in this next week, because the girls will have the opportunity to make the decision as we see next week's episode. And then Danny and Becca, they didn't have a lot of screen time, but that was the next choice. And then we kind of get into what I felt was, okay, the cliffhanger moments. Who was going with who? Who did you girls think that Brandon was going to talk to? Because just before he went into the rose ceremony, he had a conversation with Julia, and she said, if I remember correctly, that I'm here for what's best for me. And he didn't really respond to that. So going into the rose ceremony, the fact that both her and I believe her name was Savannah were both still wait to be chosen. Did you think he was going to go with Savannah or go with Julia?
I really hoped he was going to go with Mel, actually, the girl that has the purple hair, just because I think she's a great character for the show. And I think that that would have been really interesting to watch play out.
And as you mentioned, Mel,
I'm not surprised he went with Savannah. Yeah, sorry. I'm not surprised he went with Savannah. That's kind of what I thought he would do. Savannah's a sure thing, where Julia isn't a sure thing at this point with her relationship with Sheridan. So that's kind of what I thought he would do.
You mentioned Mel Briana. Last night, a lot of the girls were having conversations about Mel during the rose ceremony, the ones that got selected to move on to the next week. Do you think she had more of a personal connection with the women in the house than the men? Or do you think most of the men were kind of coupled up already to some level where she just didn't have a lot of opportunities?
I think probably a little bit of both, but it always amazes me how quickly these girls become like soul sisters. Like I said earlier, they've only been there 3 days, and one of them even mentioned that they've cried in front of everybody already. And I guess that would be me on the show too, so I can't judge too hard. But overall, it's like it's always so fascinating how quickly, and it makes more sense on a show like this versus like The Bachelor, where they're supposed to be quote competing for the same guy. Um, but yeah, I felt bad for Mel. I think that I don't know, she seems like she's got a lot of issues, but like a genuinely nice person. And so I guess I just wanted her to hang around, but I also don't think that Brandon was right for her because, as she said, she's never had a functional relationship, and I don't think Brandon is the one to give that to her.
And we already kind of spilled the beans.
Well,
We kind of already spilled the beans. Julia and Sheraton ended up hooking up at the end. And then we saw them all gather. Brandon gave a toast, and then we got to see some of the footage for next week or the upcoming weeks in the episode. And it looks like, from what we can see, that next week's episode is going to involve some judging. And there is some past Bachelor and Bachelorettes that are part of that panel, which makes sense. Everything that Bachelor does is try to bring in Bachelor Nation and bring in the other elements to keep you drawn to the show. So when you looked at those previews, Carrie, did you see a sense of this competition kind of going down a music lane? And did that kind of like excite you, or did that make you nervous for the love story and where that might turn out?
Yeah, that is exciting to me. I love it. Looked like we saw JoJo and Jordan, great Bachelor couple. Then we saw Caitlyn and Jason, I'm pretty sure. And then we also saw some musicians. So we saw Jason Mraz, we saw Kesha. There were a couple other people that we saw. So that I think is exciting. I think what they're trying to do, if I would guess, they've got the love part with the Bachelor couples, and then they've got the music part with the, tried and true musicians. So I think they're trying to marry those together in the next couple of episodes, which I think is great. We saw JoJo say something in one of the previews that it looks like someone is more into the other person than, it's not reciprocated. So I don't know how they're going to, like, what their criteria for judging is, but I am excited for how they're going to marry those two together and to see where it goes.
Yeah, it almost seems like they're going to judge both parts, and I think that would be really hard to judge somebody's love from the outside, but it looks like that's what they're attempting.
Well, we'll see how they do it next week. Obviously, next week the girls are going to have the voice, and we have 8 couples going into it. We can kind of assume that maybe 2, 3, or 4 new men are going to come into next week's show. But looking at the 8 couples right now, Briana, is there 3 couples that you feel that will make it through next week?
Yeah, I think Bree and Chris are great, and I think they'll make it. I agree that they're like the Dylan Hannah of this show. I think that Julia is going to stick around, with whom I'm not sure, but I think she's going to be a staple because they've spent so much time developing her character. And I think that, let's see, looking at the list, I think Jamie will stick around too because they've already shown her on 2 dates. We've gotten to know her, so why would they show that so I think that Jamie and, what's his name, Trevor, I think that'll play out too. I think that'll make it another week.
What about you, Carrie?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Bree. The more I watch this show, the more or any Bachelor show, it's very formulaic, and maybe, we're all in media, I'm in TV, and there's a formula to how they do this, and you can tell if you've been watching it long enough, you can tell who's going to, be to the end by how much screen time they're getting. And like Bree said, how much time they're giving the viewer to invest in this person's character background. We saw Julia, she has cystic fibrosis. I'm pretty sure we heard her talk some about that. It is incredible that they let us into that part of her circle. And getting to, tell her story through that. We've seen a lot of Rudy. We've seen a lot of Ryan and Matt, and just because they've gotten so much screen time, that's a good hint that they're going to be around for a while. Same with Jamie. they're probably going to be around for a while. In what capacity? I don't know. But the more time they spend developing these stories, the better chance these people are going to be around.
So my thoughts on next week is I think Chris and Bree will make it. That couple's going to stay untouched. It's going to go on. But I think Trevor and Brandon are going to stay in the show next week. But I do think there might be a possibility that they couple up with somebody else. Obviously, those two have had some interest from other women. But I think what's going to happen is Jamie, she's going to be in the show like you guys said. But I think maybe there's going to be some different male talent that comes into the mix next week. And with the situation that just happened and her having this trust issue and being sensitive to that, she might explore other opportunities that come in there. But I do think Trevor and Brandon will hang on. I just don't know if they'll still be in relationships with Savannah and Jamie after next week. But I still think they'll be in the show. So yeah, next week, Monday night, we'll see where this goes. We'll see how it does. I like seeing the music being entered into this. I wouldn't say this is a new favorite show for me. I'm still very much intrigued by it. Probably for the biggest reason is I don't know how the producers are going to separate that love from talent element. And if they can somehow pull that together and keep me into a fan, it might be, I don't think it'll be my top show. I'm still a Bachelor in Paradise #1 fan, but it might trump the Bachelor or Bachelorette individual series. Before we go, any last minute comments or thoughts on the show, Carrie?
Yeah, BIP is always going to be my #1. I just love that show. It's so entertaining, and it's the perfect mix of like entertainment, but also love. So there's nothing that's going to replace BIP in my heart, but this is definitely, it's proving to be entertaining. It's a weird time. I'm here for it.
Yeah, and I just want to conclude by saying a huge thank you to my husband for going and braving the grocery store to get me a bottle of Cabernet for last night's episode because we were almost out of wine. So thank you to him.
Well, on that note, guys, thanks for tuning into this week's episode. We'll probably do this next week. We've been seeing to get a lot of interest in our feedback and our thoughts on the show. It's a good opportunity for us to connect with you guys on more of a personal level. There's so much that we cover in media, and we share the stories of what other individuals are doing. So this is one of those opportunities we get to show some of our passions or guilty pleasures. And the fact that I'm on this podcast sharing my own thoughts on this probably says a lot. So my man card is probably put away for a couple of days, but that's okay. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button.